Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Good Samaritan Healthcast. I am your host, Clint Cubo. Today I have Adam Thacker, our Chief Operating Officer, and we will be talking about going in depth about COVID-19 vaccine and its FDA's approval and all that stuff. So thank you for joining me, Adam.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes, exciting news this week.
Very. So we will just dive right into it. So just kind of for first off, right off the bat, what all goes into a vaccine being FDA approved?
Sure. Well, it's a long, laborious process. But I think when you talk about a vaccine being approved or a medication being approved from the Food and Drug Administration, you have to go back in a vaccine and look at where it starts. And it starts with having a virus or a bacteria that is infecting people, making them sick, and that there becomes a need to create that vaccine. So vaccines are created starting out in a lab. The virus or the bacteria, in this case, SARS-CoV-2, we're talking about the virus that's wreaking havoc on us now and causing a pandemic. That in a lab started with reverse engineering to how do we create a mimic of that virus to put into the body that tells our body to recognize SARS-CoV-2 virus and create antibodies to fight that virus. So vaccines are intended to fight viruses by they tell our bodies to get a jump start. They prepare our immune system. So then when we do come in contact with the virus, that our bodies say, I recognize that, I'm going to go after it and shut it down before it becomes full-blown infection and we have illness and disease. So in that lab, the first and foremost priority is safety. So they look at safety. That starts, or once they have a product that they believe can work, a vaccine, then it starts to look at safety. And when we go through what are called clinical trials, there are phases to that. So the phase 1 is safety. It's generally tested in animals first. Now, as we have continued to evolve in a very technology-driven world, there's less and less of that and more computer algorithm and computer-based testing to be able to analyze safety profiles and how it would respond within the body. So then we jump to, everything passes that, then we jump to phase 2. Phase 2 is a small trial, human trial, where we start to look at efficacy and safety, maybe less than 100 people, and these are volunteers that sign up for this. And then we move past that into phase 3. Phase 3 are where you really, absent COVID, because we knew about every step with it being the most scrutinized vaccine that we've ever seen. But in the normal traditional world, you don't hear about a drug or a vaccine coming to market until really phase 3. And then we start looking at numbers of individuals in the few thousands. I found it very interesting as I was doing a little bit of looking in that the typical clinical trial has about 2,000 people enrolled in it. When you look at the Pfizer, now Comirnaty, because it has been approved trial, it started with 44,000 individuals that were enrolled in that phase 3 trial. Wow. So they had two sides. It's called randomized controlled study, had 22,000 individuals who received the vaccine that is now approved, and 22,000 individuals who received placebo. And so those sides are compared, and the bias is removed because these are randomized controlled studies. A lot of times the scientists running the studies don't even know who the control group is and who the actual is getting the vaccine group is. That's known at a level that's one step removed from the actual administration, so it removes the bias from that. So it started there, and then totally unique to this situation is emergency use authorization, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and then millions of doses being given. The FDA didn't just stop and say, hey, we did our job, we gave emergency use approval. They continued to evaluate that. So we're now north of 200 million doses that played into the approval process. The other piece that kind of goes into that is you look at how this could happen so quickly. when it takes years for this to accomplish outside of this. And I think the crucial element that we talk about there is resources and effort.
Right.
So this is a worldwide pandemic that literally the world was on standstill for a vaccine. There's nothing more important in the last 18 months than ending the pandemic.
Right.
So financial resources, scientist resources, the minds that are going into this, technology resources is unlimited.
Well, and that kind of goes into, I've talked to people who are like, when they compare it to the flu vaccine, and they're like, well, the flu vaccine has been, it's been around for a really, really long time. We just know so much more about that compared to COVID. And I always kind of think of whenever it was, created. A long time ago, they didn't have the documentation and the communication technology that we have today to get it to other researchers across the world and stuff like that. So it really was a worldwide combined effort compared to a lot more limited capabilities back in those days.
Right. And the flu vaccine is always an interesting comparison because, influenza and coronavirus have had their comparisons, and so that drew to the vaccine comparisons. Interestingly, though, and outside of the medical world, I don't know that everybody's as aware of this, but every year scientists make an educated guess on what the emerging influenza virus strains will be, and the vaccine is then formulated to those strains. So in less than a year's time, every single year, we create an influenza vaccine.
Right. So it's a new vaccine
every single year. Now, there are constants in the inactive ingredients, just as there are in this. And these inactive ingredients in the coronavirus vaccines were used in many other vaccines. Now, the new technology makes people pause, but then you look at the mRNA technology and step back from a science world and say it's got decades of experience in targeted cell therapy for cancer patients. It's not new. It's new to vaccines. And mRNA vaccines that failed prior, which has drawn some criticism, they didn't fail because they were unsafe. They didn't fail because they shouldn't be given to humans for one reason or other concern. They failed because funding wasn't there, or because they didn't show efficacy.
Right.
So in the case of this, as we talked about, funding was unlimited, and the efficacy has proven to be greater than many vaccines. So then you proceed forward, and it puts us where we're at today, where we now have an FDA-approved vaccine that has shown efficacy, safety, and really, starts to move us forward in this pandemic.
Yeah. So what does this kind of mean for, I guess we can start as broad as our nation. So what does this mean for the country?
Sure. Well, I wish I could sit here and say that this means the pandemic's going to end, because that, our 60% of the nation that is vaccinated now is going to become 95. Unfortunately, I can't sit here and say that because hesitancy is still there, and there's still a feeling of rushed, regardless of the justification of resources. But I think what it does mean is that there is a percentage of the population that is unvaccinated, that was hesitant, that now can look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm getting ready to take my blood pressure medication. I'm getting ready to take my heart failure medication, diabetes medication. I have a headache. I'm going to take ibuprofen. And Comirnaty, which is hard to say, we're going to have to just call it Pfizer. The vaccine that is now approved is in the same boat as all of those medications now. It's full FDA approval. It's been vetted. And there's no reason to believe that Moderna is not on the heels of that in the same boat because of efficacy and safety, and J&J the same way. So I think we'll see a population that does get past their hesitancy because of the approval. And we've already started to see this, but employer mandates are going to grow exponentially now that there is a full FDA approval.
Just on Facebook alone, I've seen company after company come out and say, we're doing this. I mean, even I think CVS, they're having all of their corporate and
Right.
pharmacists and everyone.
Over 100,000 employees, CVS now this week, because of the FDA approval, have moved in that direction. And yeah, that list is going to continue to grow. It was growing in healthcare, but now it's going to grow, exponentially beyond that. I mean, expect manufacturing and airlines and service industries, hotels are going to be looking at this for a couple of reasons. One is that the productivity and safety and availability of their workforce is important, and this is proving to be a tool that can help them in that. And also, especially for the large companies that really have a national impact, I mean, they're seeing this as this is the greater good that we need to be a part of and really move in this direction. So I think that's what it means from a nation standpoint, is lower some hesitancies, but also from the employment ranks, we're going to see employers really get on board with this is a condition of employment.
Right. And do you kind of expect kind of the same reaction for the community?
Yeah, I think we'll see the same in the community. Obviously in a community our size, being smaller, we feel those things more. So that's going to be more newsworthy, and we're going to feel it when we start to see that. But I do expect that will continue to occur, and it's not a stretch to think about the educational areas and other manufacturing plants that have other conditions of employment in place today that we're just waiting on some of this to drive that. And so as we see that and knowing what the vaccine is capable of, I really see that the other impact is that vaccination rates go up, infection rates go down.
Right. And so the vaccine is approved for 16 and older. So can you kind of talk a little bit about, so they approved the emergency use for 12 and up. Why is the cutoff at 16 this time?
Sure. So if you go back to when emergency use authorization was provided, that was for 16 years of age and older. So that is the most data that we have. That's the longest ranging data. So it starts there. From reviewing the data sets all the way through. By and large, the 200 million doses, the vast majority have been given to the 16 and older population. And you also talk about the implications for those employer mandates and moving forward in the adult workforce. That was the priority. The 12 to 15 population that was expanded emergency use came much later. So it makes sense that now the evaluation will occur in those populations for an FDA approval for that to come later. And most recently, we've seen the expansion for and recommendation for boosters, and that's still under emergency use. So I would expect that the same would happen, and there would be a review process for that. So I think when you have hesitancy, it's easy for that to kind of grow and say, well, we're giving it to 12 and older. Why did it only get approved for 16? And is there concern for a 12 to 15-year-old population? And there's really no cause for concern. The safety and efficacy profiles have been tremendous in the 12 to 15-year-old. It's really just a matter of timing.
Okay. And so can people under 16, like the 12 and 15-year-olds, can they still get the vaccine under the emergency use?
Yes, the emergency use authorization still applies for 12 to 15 and boosters. So there's no pause in availability for that. Can still sign up, get vaccinated. We're still recommending that, of course, and really it's no change for that group.
Okay. And when do you have any kind of ballpark idea of when that would be FDA approved for that age range?
FDA stays pretty tight-lipped. Even up to this announcement of the FDA approval, it was, they really kept a poker face and said, we're working as diligently as we can, but we're not going to jump any steps, and we're going to evaluate the data. And when the stamp of approval is given, then we know that we checked every single box. So if you look at the EUA process and just say, let's make some educated guesses, And we're probably looking towards the end of the year that would happen. Now, the other thing is there, if there becomes an emphasis to prioritize that we need to move in that direction, then they may go ahead and move in that direction. But even though the 12 to 15 population, the vaccination rates are low, haven't seen the hospitalizations, haven't seen the deaths, haven't seen the impact on that age group that we have on the older population, adult population. So the urgency is not there to the same degree.
Sure. So people might still be hung up on the whole thing because it was quickly developed. And, but the thing is that coronavirus vaccines, and I'm talking coronavirus as a whole, not just COVID vaccines. The coronavirus vaccines have been in development for a long time. Could you speak to that at all and kind of explain that these vaccines have been around for a long time and it's
Sure.
not just a sudden thing?
Right. The theory of a coronavirus vaccine, dates a couple decades. So we go back and look at that. And then, the identification and naming of coronavirus goes back to the 1930s. So we're coming up on, we're going to be hitting the century mark that this has been around. I think when we hear novel coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 as a new virus, there's this immediate thought process that this is new and it's been dormant in some world that we didn't know about for forever. And how did this happen? But the coronavirus family is a well-known virus family in the science world and the medical world. It attaches to the common cold. Many people have heard of SARS, MERS, which was the Middle Eastern respiratory virus. So a lot of respiratory viruses have a coronavirus trait. So it stands to reason that the development of vaccines for that have also been around for quite some time. Mm-hmm. So you go to the early 90s and there was trials around trying to create a coronavirus vaccine specific to a canine coronavirus, which another element is, okay, why haven't I heard of that one? Or, whatever the next one is, why haven't I heard of that one? Where SARS-CoV-2 separates itself from other coronaviruses, unfortunately, is it's highly transmissible. So from person to person, highly transmissible. But it made that leap from animal to human and didn't just infect one human, even if it was highly virulent, mm-hmm. and then go away. So SARS and MERS especially, MERS was known as highly virulent, but it wasn't very transmissible. So you couldn't just stand in a room and say, hey, 1 in 4 people are going to get this. And now with the Delta variant, stand in a room and say, if you're unmasked, pretty high likelihood probably going to get it. It was that the transmissibility was very low, but highly virulent, so a lot of mortality. Mm-hmm. So those types of viruses, they tend to burn themselves out. And by the time you can develop a vaccine, it may be a non-issue because mm-hmm. you space out and it runs its course.
Right.
This has continued to find a way to be transmissible and to change through variants and mutations. And that's where it's, continuing to wreak havoc that it is today. But there were vaccines that were focused at some of those earlier approaches. And really, it comes back to what we talked about in the very beginning with how FDA approval works. And if you go all the way back to the investment from a lab and clinical trials, manufacturing, we didn't really talk about manufacturing, but millions and millions of dollars go into the manufacturing and trials. And so when you have a virus that's starting to burn itself out, the funding's not there.
Right.
Those other viruses didn't cause a worldwide pandemic that shut the world down.
Right.
So they just simply weren't there and then continued to go. But what's interesting, if you look back at some of those early vaccines, the spike protein that we talk about was where they targeted. Mm-hmm. That also helped the speed of this vaccine being created, because another element of hesitancy is how on earth can this happen so fast? Because mm-hmm. we believe it's a brand new virus. It was a brand new type of virus in the same family, so we knew a lot about it. And we believe that the speed, when we're hesitant, we believe that the speed was such that you had to cut corners or Something had to be missed. But what we forget is we had a framework to start to work off of. We had those 2 decades of or a vaccine towards coronavirus, so we kind of knew some things worked, some things didn't.
So they kind of adapted
Absolutely.
some of the stuff.
Yeah, and some of the scientists that were involved with this had been involved with some of those earlier developments. So, they looked at this when that genetic code was unlocked and shared amongst the world, because it was no longer a competitive, I want to hold on to this and create the vaccine. It was shared amongst the world, and whoever can create it.
Right.
So you had scientists that already had decades of experience that were able to say, okay, we're not going to take that misstep, so we can go to, we know these don't work. What's next? And that really helped from a speed standpoint. And then you go back to removing barriers such as funding and manufacturing. A cool point in the manufacturing piece is that because those barriers were removed, Pfizer, as they were trialing certain batches of the vaccine, they went ahead and produced millions of doses to say, if this one works, it's already ready.
Right.
And when we get the EUA, emergency use, it's already ready. When you look at the timeline of normal production, we get the green light to say everything works. Now let's start the production of it, and we'll build up to that and send it out, because we can't take the risk of developing something in manufacturing and having it in a box ready to go to only be told this isn't the right one. But in this case, that was removed and said, no, run those parallel processes, develop and manufacture at the same time. So when development says green light, this works, manufacturing says we're done.
Right.
And now it comes to deployment.
So let's talk a little bit about vaccine efficacy. So there's a lot of people who think that if I get the vaccine, I'm completely protected from COVID-19. I'm not going to catch it. Could you explain to what efficacy means and what all goes into that?
Sure. We tend to have an all or none. Is it 100%? I can't get infected and compare it to, well, there's no more smallpox. So I know the vaccine just shut it down and was 100% effective. But what we have to keep in mind is that what was the vaccine created to do? So very similar to the influenza vaccine. The vaccine was not created to put an invisible shield around your body and say that the virus will be repelled if you run into it. The virus still enters your body. What the vaccine was created to do and where its efficacious comes in is to prevent clinical illness. And by and large, what preventing clinical illness does is it accomplishes the 2 main goals, which were preservation of life and a return to societal function. And so return to societal function just means that we're able to move away from shelter in place and back to having normal lives where we can attend things. And we do that through a vaccination program. So as we look at efficacy, we hear with Delta variant that we're in the 90% for efficacy, and that's dropped into the 60s and 70s. But what we have to keep in mind is that how the vaccine is intended to work is to keep people out of the hospital and to keep people from dying.
Right.
And 97% of hospitalizations across the country are unvaccinated. And less than 1% of deaths have been vaccinated. So it's accomplishing the goal of, you may have a breakthrough infection, even though those are rare. You may have a breakthrough infection, you may have a sore throat, you may have a headache, but you're going to recover at home and you're going to avoid having to be in the hospital, where unprotected, your immune system doesn't have that jump start. The novel virus enters and you don't recognize it until you're sick, and then sick. And that's where we end up with hospitalization, and that's where we end up with an immune system becoming overridden to where we end up with death. So efficacy gets tied to prevention. Vaccines, they prevent clinical illness. They don't prevent the virus from coming into the body.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about the differences of efficacy between Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna what their efficacy rates are right now.
So Pfizer and Moderna are the two mRNA technology vaccines. Their efficacy has continued to be extremely high in the 90% range. When we talk about Delta and say that that's dropped into the mid 60s, 70s, that is for efficacy in testing positive for an infection, but not in hospitalization. So the efficacy from a hospitalization and death is in the high 90s.
Okay.
Johnson & Johnson similarly started with a lower efficacy rate against the initial SARS-CoV-2 before we started getting into all the letters of the variants. And it was touted as one shot but lower efficacy in the high 70s%. But what, unfortunately, because that's not as that's noteworthy for the media to report this efficacy is less than this efficacy for Pfizer, what got lost in that is that it was also in the high 90s for hospitalization and death.
Okay.
And it remains very high for hospitalization and death. So when we look at it, efficacy for preventing hospitalization and death is in the high 90s. Efficacy against breakthrough infection with the Delta variant has waned a little bit in the high 60s, 70s. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because breakthrough infections will occur. And as long as it's not leading to hospitalization and we're still practicing other health measures with masking and distancing, then we're not just having a spreading virus continually.
Okay. Good. So we're kind of going to shift gears a little bit here. So a lot of questions that people bring up, and what is a fear among a lot of women, is vaccine safety for what if I want to get pregnant, or what if I'm currently pregnant. Could you talk a little bit about the safety concerns for pregnant women or women who want to be pregnant?
Sure, absolutely. So I will just start off with a qualifying statement that this is absolutely a safe and effective vaccine for childbearing women, pregnant women, lactating women. The decades and decades of experienced medical professionals for the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, have came out with joint statements strongly advocating for pregnant women to become vaccinated. And then on the flip side, because in individually or from a group standpoint, we tend to operate in a risk benefit. So why would I get the vaccine if I'm otherwise healthy? I'm only pregnant. But what we know is respiratory viruses can create quite a risk for pregnant women. From anything from hospitalization risk to the mother to risk to the baby and development. I found it interesting. There was a JAMA article, which is the Journal for American Medical Association, that was published here recently. Pregnant women contracting COVID are 15 times more likely to die, 14 times more likely to be intubated, and 22 times more likely to have a preterm birth than those who are uninfected.
Wow. That's
those numbers are staggering. I've never seen anything like that. And so if we're going to operate from a risk benefit standpoint, the risk of vaccines in pregnant women has been proven to be statistically no different than the risk to you or I or a woman of childbearing age in any way. It puts a huge exclamation mark, caps, bolded, everything that you can think of on the misinformation that is out there. Because misinformation started right out of the gate with the vaccine coming out that it wasn't studied in childbearing women, it wasn't studied in pregnant women. So how can you be sure?
Right.
And the fact is that not only is it safe and effective, but the risk of contracting COVID is extremely risky. And so this is a potential protection that we can take part in. And when ACOG and maternal fetal medicine put out that joint statement, I found it interesting that they did a retrospective review. Tens of thousands of pregnant women have been vaccinated during this EUA process, and they have not found any significant risk to that population. So the argument that I'm otherwise healthy is really debunked. The argument that it wasn't studied in pregnant women or women of childbearing age is now debunked because we've given millions of doses and tens of thousands to a pregnant population. There's a joint statement from the trusted medical professionals that this population also trusts when they tell them to take their prenatal vitamin or when to see an OB and ultrasounds and every other aspect of the pregnancy, but misinformation has misguided this so far. It's honestly, it's quite baffling to me to see how it's misled that so far. And when I saw that JAMA information, that just really ties it all together to say the story that's out there is not the story that primary literature is proving to be true. And it's Russian roulette with your life if you're in that category and not getting vaccinated. My advice is not to be around people because the risk is that if you do become infected with COVID, that you could have a very serious outcome.
And I've seen online just of people saying that the vaccine will cause miscarriages and stuff, or will create complications of getting pregnant. None of that is true.
There's been no scientific data to support any of that.
Right.
I think what happens is as human nature, we know somebody that knows somebody, and one individual had an outcome. But an individual wins the lottery. An individual gets struck by lightning. And we don't immediately apply that to next time I walk outside, I'm going to get struck by lightning. Right. Or I'm going to go buy a ticket and I'm guaranteed I'm going to win the lottery because I know somebody that won the lottery. I mean, we often think about things in odds, and that in the medical world turns into that risk benefit. And so when you hear those things, I'm not denoting that maybe that happened in a pregnant woman had a miscarriage. But there is no scientific data in any way that ties that to the vaccine. Okay. And so if a vaccinated pregnant woman has a miscarriage, it doesn't mean it was the vaccine. It could be idiopathic, meaning there's no explanation, that it just simply happened. There could be other factors in that with, environmental factors. You just don't know the situation. Right. But the direct correlation to tie that to the vaccine is not there.
Right. So all in all, get the vaccine. If you're pregnant, or even if you're not pregnant and wanting to become pregnant, just do it. So we'll kind of move on to boosters. So it's come out that there are boosters. Can you talk about what the boosters are, if it boosts efficacy, when they would be needed after your initial vaccination?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first clarification point is boosters versus third dose. So some have said, why is it called a booster? Why is it called a third dose? And as of right now today, they're the same thing. So the administration of a third dose of either vaccine, the Comirnaty or the Moderna vaccine, is the same dose as the previous first and second doses. So same amount, same formulation, same everything. J&J right now is not recommended for a booster. That goes back to the timing of the data. It's not to mean that there won't be. I know they're studying that and looking at that being a approval process down the road. So when we start to look at boosters, let's start with the why get a booster. So what the data continues to tell us from a scientific standpoint is that moderately to severely immunocompromised patients may have not had the full immunity response to 2 doses. because their immune system was already weakened either from an autoimmune disease or because they're active cancer patient and taking treatments that suppress their immune system, or a solid organ transplant patient. So when transplant patients get a new organ, one of the things that they are on is medication to suppress their immune system so their immune system doesn't attack the new organ and basically allow it not to work and adapt to the body. The risk of that is it suppresses your immune system so you don't respond to infections and those types of things. So the vaccine then doesn't create the response either. What a third dose of a booster does is it introduces that code again to say, hey, immune system, remember this, and when you see this virus, attack it, rather than allowing it to come into your body and create a high viral load and infection and such. So that's where we're at right now today, is that the FDA expanded their emergency use authorization for boosters. The CDC has a subset of their organization called the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices. They reviewed the data and came out with their recommendation that those moderately to severely immunocompromised patients should get a booster. And that's went into effect now. Now, the next phase is September 20th will be the next expansion of boosters. And that one's a little bit different. So that's not looking at you've had the vaccine, but you might not have had the response. That is looking at, now that we're getting further out in data sets, that they've noticed that about 8 months after, 6 to 8 months is what the data says, but at 8 months after you've had your second shot, there is some waning efficacy of, or some waning antibody titers, which can impact efficacy because you don't have the antibodies still available. So that booster shot after September 20th will be recommended for anybody who is 8 months or greater out from their second shot.
Okay.
And what it does is, it's called a booster. It does exactly that. It boosts your immune system back up to those 95, 96% efficacy rates. And that's important going forward. And this is somewhat of what you'd call a preemptive strike, because 2 shots, you're fully vaccinated. But as variants have emerged, the Delta variant has shown some ability to cause breakthrough infections. The preemptive strike is, let's boost our immune systems back up, because the next variant or the next variant may be one that has even more evasive principles and could get around the vaccine. So we want our immune system at its peak. So that's the thinking behind that and the boosters. So now when you go back and start to look at who's going to be vaccinated for boosters, you just kind of do the math on a year plus, or I guess now we're 8 months ago when we started vaccinating. It was our older population, it was our long-term care population, and it was our healthcare providers. So after September 20th, that'll be the groups that start to hit that 8 months and are eligible to be vaccinated with a booster.
Okay. So it's not going to be rolled out like ages like they did with the original vaccine. It's just purely on when your last dose was.
Yeah. Which to some degree does roll it out that way, because it's based off the timing, but there won't be a communication that says now it's if you're in your 60s, if you're in your 50s, that type of thing, because if you just go off of the timing of that, it'll hit those big buckets. Now, if you had somebody, let's say, that works in healthcare but waited to get the vaccine until March, then they wouldn't be eligible in late September. You'd be looking at November, because you'd have to go that 8 month period. So there's a timing element to that, and whether that will continue forward or not. What we do from a medical science standpoint is make the decisions based off the data we have, and then if there are new variants emerge, or if there are waning of antibodies, then recommendations as to whether there's an annual booster or not are yet to be determined. certainly the medical world hopes there is not, but we're also waiting to see what the data tells us.
So, with the boosters, so we had the vaccine clinic. Do you see us having to do another clinic for the boosters?
So at this time, Good Samaritan's focus is we'll be providing vaccination to our employees, whether that is first-time vaccination, whether that is booster vaccination, the eligibility for our employees we will take care of here. From a community standpoint, we work in pretty close collaboration with Knox County Health Department and Dr. Stewart's group. They are ramping up their ability to give boosters now to that immunocompromised group, and in the future to anyone who would want that.
Okay.
If they become overwhelmed, then we have committed to stepping in and helping the community and running a vaccination clinic.
Okay.
But looking at the first few months, it was predominantly healthcare. So we're going to own a lot of that population just right out of the gate.
Right. So, and the boosters with the different brands, companies and stuff, can they be mixed and matched, or how does that work?
So the recommendation is that they should not be. If you are fully vaccinated with Moderna, your booster shot should be Moderna. If you're fully vaccinated with Pfizer, your booster shot should be Pfizer. At Good Samaritan, our clinic, we only gave Pfizer. So that is what the majority of our employees received. Now, they could have went somewhere else and got Moderna, or they could be a newer employee that got Moderna and now would be here, and they would have to go over to the health department to get Moderna. Or if somebody had Pfizer, we would take care of them here.
Okay.
But they should not be mixed and matched. Now, if you go out and fact check me on CDC, you will see that they say they're not interchangeable, but in rare exceptional circumstances where one vaccine becomes unavailable, then they can be. We're fortunate here in Southwest Indiana that's not the case. We've been able to have sufficient and even ample supply of both vaccines. So I don't really expect that to be of any impact here. But certainly in some places in this country and as it expands in the world, that likely will be a impact that will be looked at. But given our current status, Pfizer fully vaccinated will get a Pfizer booster, and Moderna will get Moderna.
Okay. And just for the heck of it, what would happen if I got Pfizer? What would happen if I got Moderna?
Nothing. They're both created on mRNA platforms, so there's not it's not Ghostbusters, don't cross the streams. There's not really a risk of there being a negative impact. The recommendation is if you've already had one vaccine to stick with that same vaccine, because when it has the effect that it does in your body to boost your immune system, you've already seen that now 1, 2, and a third time. Seeing 1, 2, and it looks very similar, but it's a little bit different the third time. There's just not the same science behind, will you have the response we expect you to have?
Okay. So talking about a bit about the effects on hospitals with COVID and the vaccinated cases or unvaccinated cases. So can you talk about the effects on hospitals because of unvaccinated cases, like running out of beds or healthcare professional services, things like that?
Absolutely. So hospitals across the nation are battling with resources, whether that is those of talent and professional personnel, from nurses to physicians, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, therapists that are going in the room taking care of patients, to ancillary support resources and people in our food services, environmental services, dietary, that are less recognized as touching the patient, but support everything that happens here and are absolutely crucial to what goes on. So every hospital in the country is battling with that. And then you talk about the physical resources of bed availability and supplies, and the pressure that is being put on being able to get those resources to take care of people. And then you step back and look at our census and say 95% of that is avoidable. to a very high degree. We're sitting on a census, right here today on August 25th of 22 patients in our hospital requiring that level of care for COVID, and 20 of them are unvaccinated. And I look at the month of August and say our average census in the month of August has been 18. And if everybody was vaccinated 100%, which I know is a little bit of a stretch, but let's just say for argument's sake, 100% of this entire region was vaccinated, then our average census, being liberal, would have been 3.
Wow.
So the impact on hospitals, mental fatigue, resource burn, none of this has anything to do with cost. It has to do with people and how do we do it and how do we take care of them. I mean, I can't even quantify or qualify the impact on hospitals when we know that there is something out there that can help resolve this issue. I hesitate to call it a solution because we go back to it's not a solution. It's not 100%, but it's a medical countermeasure to what we're seeing with the virus, and it absolutely works, and it absolutely can impact the effects, and that's in the hospital. So then look at the ambulatory side, and look at our convenient cares that average 40 to 50 visits this time of year. And we've been in the 220 to 250 range. I mean, we have people, and the vast majority of that is for COVID, and the vast majority are unvaccinated. And the resource strain on that, and back to the mental fatigue, I get pretty passionate about this discussion because people ask, what can we do? And, the answer's there, but I don't want to do that. What else can I do? Well, certainly there are other things that can be done with masking and distancing, but, then we get into it again, but I don't want to do that. That there comes a time that personal choices affect people and have an impact on others, and that becomes public health. And that's the line that unfortunately we're crossing, and we can't, and we've got to move back to, we're making the choices for the greater good, and doing our research to make sure that we're making that decision.
Right. Yeah. It's that those numbers are just the convenient care clinic numbers. I mean, I think I heard those a couple days ago, and it's just astronomical.
It is. It's if I would have been asked before this surge, what do you think the peak convenient care number ever will be? I might have said 100, and I would have been hard pressed to say 100, because in my 8 years here and being involved with convenient care that entire time, I can remember sending extra people and having calls from staff of what is going on. We're overwhelmed pre-COVID, and we're in the 60s. And so now you look at numbers, and last week we went 190, 200, 200 plus, 220, 250. I saw the numbers from this weekend, and it was 400 plus from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So and you see those numbers, and it's people that are, having to do that, and the implications of that I think just totally get missed by the general public. There's people not eating. You don't get to go to the bathroom. You certainly don't get to, check on your family or do anything from a personal standpoint.
Right.
So the mental and physical, impacts of that, the people are by far the most important thing in this organization, and the impacts of that are just something that we've never seen before. And for the most part, they do it, they get through it, and make it happen, and they show up the next day. So we thought last year healthcare got recognized for the heroes really that have always been. but it's nothing compared to this year and or this time. And now that we're seeing this surge, it's almost like there's a obliviousness to this is even going on,
right,
in some degree. Yet healthcare is just absolutely overwhelmed. And this is, I'm not touting, hey, this is just Good Samaritan. I'm the administrator on call this week, and the last 2 days I've talked to the nursing supervisor at 2 a.m., then 6 a.m., the night before midnight, then 2 a.m. And we're having hospitals call us from Indianapolis trying to send patients to us.
Wow.
I've never seen that. We had a hospital over 3 hours away, over 180 miles away in Illinois, which is closer to St. Louis, which is closer to Mount Vernon, towns that have equipped regional hospitals, trying to send patients to us.
Wow.
Because they don't have any beds and they don't know what to do with the patient. And in some cases, we've been able to take them, but our community, we have to take care of our community first, and our community spans 10 counties, and so we are taking patients from the outreach areas, but it's things that I never really expected to hear in healthcare. Some of the stories that I've heard, patients getting transferred out of the Indianapolis area, a large metropolitan area that has every healthcare service that you can imagine. Mm-hmm. A CEO shared with our leadership team that they had to transfer a patient to Cincinnati for care.
Wow.
I mean, I've never heard things like that. And then you step back and you don't want to create this divide of it's all due to one thing. And it's not all due to one thing. Mm-hmm. There's so many factors into it, but you step back and look at that and say 90+%, 95+% vaccinated stay out of the hospital, recover at home. Mm-hmm. The unvaccinated have such higher risk of not only hospitalization, but ICU level needs, being on a vent, death, that it's undeniable. Our good partner, Deaconess Health System, put something out with the last couple of days that's been shared kind of around Facebook of the number of patients kind of unvaccinated versus vaccinated that they're seeing within their hospital. Mm-hmm. And and it's in a great picture, and give them kudos for putting that out there, because the picture is worth 1,000 words. But there's the vast majority unvaccinated, and then you move to ICU level of care, and that number even changes greater to there's very, very few vaccinated ending up in the ICU. If they do end up in the hospital, which is very rare, medical, surgical type of floor and recover, and then you get to the ventilator needs, mm-hmm. those that need help breathing by mechanical ventilation. They have 32 patients on a ventilator right now, and 0 are vaccinated.
Wow. So we'll kind of move on to this next question, which comes to vaccines, obviously, again. So why do you think people are more hesitant to get the COVID vaccine? And we'll bring it back to the flu comparison. So they'll mindlessly get the flu vaccine. So why do you think people are more hesitant with this?
The world has politicized this pandemic to a point that it has just become a, who do you trust? What do you trust? I don't want to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. So you take that political aspect to it, and thank goodness, we stay out of that from a local standpoint. We're just vaccinated, unvaccinated, just to be clear, we're caring for the people in front of us.
Right.
Doesn't matter what your status is. Yeah, we look at it because we look at it to say, how do we prevent illness and prevent death? But it doesn't matter. We're not going to delay care or prevent care from whether based off vaccination mm-hmm. status. But I think misinformation and the politicizing of the entire pandemic have just created such a stir. So, good thing, bad thing, access to information is greater than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. Access to good information versus bad information is greater than it's ever been. So you have to be somewhat of, a educated person or self-educated in what do I trust as a source of information versus what do I not?
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody has to agree on that. I'm a pharmacist, so Food and Drug Administration, something, my entire college training into becoming a pharmacist and my entire life has been, I've kind of known that process.
Right.
But the CDC, which is our Center for Disease Control, our World Health Organization, if you want to look outside the U.S., World Health Organization, there's infectious disease societies. There are various societies of every physician group that you can imagine, from, we talked about ACOG and fetal medicine to primary care physicians. You won't find one that doesn't support what we've been talking about. But Google doctors and Facebook doctors, they don't prescribe to science and evidence based. So I've long believed that you can go on the internet and you can find whatever answer you want, and whatever truth you want to call a truth. But I think that has created a hesitancy in people, that it's almost like the first thing I see is what I believe. And I think you've got to go back to the roots of where's the information come from,
right?
And how do I address that?
Something I have seen on social media is how the vaccine will not stop the Delta variant or various new strains. The vaccine helps,
right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what we get to. So we all have to answer kind of that internal question of why, and so when you see, well, there's breakthrough infections and viral loads are similar and I can still spread the virus, why on earth should I get this vaccine? Well, you got to go a layer deeper. Breakthrough infections are extremely rare. Less than 1% of all of the positive cases are vaccinated breakthrough infections. And the prevention of hospitalization, the prevention of death, still is the paramount piece of vaccination. So the why for you as an individual is, if you do come in contact with COVID and have a breakthrough infection, your risk of being hospitalized is extremely low as compared to unvaccinated. And then as far as the spread's really now with the Delta variant, and I'd love to be able to rewind the clock and say we had enough vaccination that we stopped the variant mutation from even having a Delta, because we'd go back to, we had 96% efficacy against the very first SARS-CoV-2 virus of even having any type of infection. But now those numbers wane because variants and mutations do what they do, which is they figure out how to work around what they're seeing. That's all viruses. But spread is now a multi-pronged approach, in that there's vaccination, there's wearing of masks, there's physical distancing, and that's how we stop the spread to where it can settle down to a point that we don't have continuing variants. So it's really going to take that at this point. But the why comes back to the data that we've talked about. The risk of serious illness is extremely diminished in the vaccinated population.
Right. So they say, well, if I get the vaccine, I can still get COVID. What's the point of me getting the vaccine if I can still get it and spread it to others? How is this helping people?
Yeah, so it goes back to, yes, you can still test positive. It doesn't put that shield around your body. It can enter your body and you can test positive, but your acuity, how sick you will be, is less, and your risk of spreading the virus through wearing a mask, through being vaccinated, is much less. And I think what we have to keep in mind is, can somebody who's vaccinated spread COVID? The answer in a yes/no question is yes. But less than 1% of those vaccinated are having breakthrough infections and are testing positive. So that risk of spread is extremely diminished as opposed to our unvaccinated population.
Right. So, and then just a couple more questions here. So just say you have a loved one and they are just downright refusing to get the vaccine. So what would you tell them to convince them just to think about reconsidering? vaccine?
Watch this podcast
Mm-hmm.
is what I would tell them. Everything that we've talked about from an individual aspect is decreasing your risk of illness, decreasing your risk of hospitalization. And then from a altruistic nature of the greater good and what we're doing is it's to keep our community safe, to keep loved ones safe. I, for one, don't want to be visiting a family member in a hospital room or have a family member in a hospital bed and feel like I contributed to that because I was unvaccinated and became ill and spread that. Because when we start exhibiting symptoms, the data shows that 48 hours prior to that we're contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And so that risk is really something that I think we all have to step back and think about, what's our risk to others.
Mm-hmm.
And with my family, I mean, I've given them all advice to get vaccinated. Thankfully, they listened to me and have done so. But I think it's about education and being able to have that one-on-one talk. And a lot of times when I've had that, not with a loved one, but with anybody who said, I really don't want to get vaccinated, it starts with why.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we can start to decipher, is it, I just don't like being told to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it misinformation, scared of needles, whatever the case may be?
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk through that and come up with a solution and generally feel like, we reach a point that I've shared as much information as I can, and then somebody has to, as an adult, make a decision. But, really my focus is provide the education and then, expect that as members of society in this community that we're going to make the decision that is not only best for us as an individual, which is proven, but our community as well.
Mm-hmm. So I have one more question for you, and I just want you to set the record straight on this one. Were we paid by the government to provide this information?
Absolutely not. If there's a check with my name on it from the government, I don't know where it is because I'm not seeing it. No, and it ties into the misinformation. I mean, no, we're not paid for this. I mean, this is, whether it's Dr. Stein or Dr. Mahan or myself, all the other healthcare leaders that are, helping to fight this fight. There's no incentive. There's not a check from Pfizer or Moderna or the federal government or anything like that. We feel like it's our responsibility as healthcare leaders in this community to provide what we feel is evidence-based, science-based information, and so that's why we do it. There's no compensation involved in it. This falls on top of all of our other duties. So I think we would all agree that are in this fight that our hourly pay is probably going down.
Because I've always said if there was some pay, I want what's mine.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of information. Is there anything else that you would want to add before we close out today?
As you mentioned, I think covered a lot of information. I would just make it a plea to anyone who is listening to this unvaccinated and still wavering, thinking about vaccination, but have not taken that step and want more information. Get educated on some of those resources that we talked about. Talk to your provider, talk to your physician about what makes sense for you. Look me up and have a conversation. I've not turned anyone away from having a conversation about how we do this because we're passionate about having an impact in our community. So I would open that up to anyone that, you got to look at it from an individual standpoint, but we also have to look at it from a community standpoint. And the data is simply undeniable that the results moving forward and, how we in this pandemic, how we get back to normal, because that's what I get asked. How do we move forward? The answer's in front of us, and it's with a robust vaccination plan. And as that percentage in Knox County goes from 45 to, I'd love to see it be 85, that's how we we get back to no mask and not seeing restrictions come back with capacity limits or quarantines. I mean, we don't like those things, and the answer's in front of us.
All right. Well, very well said. So we will just close out this health cast this week. So I want to thank you, Adam, for joining me today. And we were supposed to have a different topic, so I thank you for quickly jumping in on this and filling our time slot here. So be sure to join us next week. We will be talking about ambulatory clinical pharmacy services. So that should be a pretty interesting topic there. Once again, thank you for listening, and we will catch you guys next week.